Welcome to St. Patrick's Cathedral. My name is Katherine and I'm going to be your guide. I'll take you through some spaces in the cathedral and share with you some of my favourite stories. There are also some questions for you along the way. We always like to start our tours in the cathedral by talking about the person the church is named after, but I'm sure you can already guess. Who do you think the cathedral is named after? If you said St. Patrick, then you're right. The cathedral is named after the patron saint of Ireland. In the cathedral, we even have a massive stained glass window which tells the story of his life in 39 images. Stained glass windows tell stories through pictures, so they're a bit like a giant comic book. Most people in the past were not able to read and write, so people use these windows as a way to tell stories from the Bible. To read a stained glass window, you always start on the bottom left-hand corner and go up. Then you go to the right-hand corner and go up, and then the same with the middle. When most people think about St. Patrick, they think of him getting rid of all the snakes out of Ireland. But to be honest, we think that's a little bit of a silly myth. So let's follow the window to tell his real story. Patrick was captured and taken to Ireland as a slave when he was only 16 years old. When he came to Ireland, he was forced to be a shepherd. And poor Patrick must have been so scared and lonely, taken away from his family. Patrick prayed to God for help, and one day his prayers were answered. God told him there would be a boat waiting for him, which would take him back home. Patrick returned home, but didn't stay too long. He eventually came back to Ireland and travelled around the country teaching people all about God. There is a local legend that says St. Patrick travelled to the site of the cathedral and baptised people using a holy well. But for many years, we didn't have any proof of this. Until 1901, when archaeologists were working in the park next door, they discovered 6 very old Celtic grave slabs. This one is particularly interesting because when the archaeologists lifted up the large stone, they found that it actually covered the remains of an old well. So some people think this may have even been the well the legend talks about, and perhaps St. Patrick himself was really here. We'll never know for sure, but what we do know is that the church is dedicated to the patron saint of Ireland. In the next stop, I'm going to be showing you all about the history of the church's construction. The cathedral didn't always look how it does today. It started out as just a small wooden church. There was a poem written in the year 1121 AD, and it talks about there being a church here called St. Patrick's in Insula. And this is actually Latin, meaning on an island. At the time, the River Poddle, which now flows under the church, used to form 2 streams, so it made the church look like it was on its own little island. In the 12th century, the Anglo-Normans arrived to Ireland, and these people were amazing craftsmen, and they were particularly good at building with stone. So, in the year 1220, Archbishop Henry of London demanded the wooden church be knocked down and rebuilt using stone. It took 50 years to build, as they did not have the modern machinery like we do today. The 14th century was a particularly unlucky time for the cathedral. In 1316, the original cathedral spire was blown down in a massive storm. Then, in 1362, a huge fire raged through the cathedral. In 1370, Archbishop Minot began repairing the cathedral and added an impressive tower to the northwest corner. This tower was 147 feet tall, and the walls were 10 feet thick. It was amazing. But then less than 30 years after it was built, the tower collapsed, destroying most of the church. Like I said, it was a very unlucky century for the building. Okay, so now it's time for a question. Look at these 2 drawings of the cathedral, and can you spot what the difference is? If you said the spire, then you're correct. This spire is 101 feet tall and was added to the top of the Minot Tower in the year 1749. Over the last 800 years, the cathedral has been through fire, flood, collapse, but most importantly, it's been through a lot of different restoration projects, and that's why it's still standing today. The North Transept has a lot of monuments that hold interesting stories. The first one is this door. It is called the Door of Reconciliation, and it relates to a story from 1492. At the time, two families were fighting outside the city walls of Dublin, the Butlers of Ormond and the Fitzgeralds of Kildare. They were fighting over who was going to be the Lord Deputy in Ireland, which at the time was a very powerful role. The fight was getting out of hand and the Butlers knew they were losing, so they ran into the chapter house of the cathedral and slammed the door closed. They claimed the old law of sanctuary, meaning they could not be harmed once inside the church. The Fitzgeralds came to the door and asked them to open up so they could make peace. But of course, the Butlers didn't believe them and thought they were being tricked. Gerald Fitzgerald then ordered a hole to be cut through the door so he could put his hand through to shake hands and show he was serious. But what do you think could have happened if he put his hand through? Well, his arm could have been cut off. But Gerald was lucky, and James did shake his hand, and peace was made. And this is where we get the famous saying, to chance your arm. Another monument in this space is one of our newest, and it was installed in 2014. It is called the Tree of Remembrance. The statue shows the tree behind barbed wire, which has been destroyed by war. We invite our visitors to put the leaves back on the tree, and they write messages to anyone they know who's been affected by war. This means that the monument is constantly changing. Every day, a new visitor will arrive into the cathedral and add their own personal story to the tree. Inside the cathedral, it holds one of the largest instruments in Ireland. It is played regularly during our daily services. Can you guess what this massive instrument is? It is the cathedral's organ. This instrument is huge. It has over 4,000 pipes, which range in size from 20 centimeters to 10 meters tall. The organ is played a bit like a piano. The musician presses different keys which force air through the pipes and makes the sounds that you hear. The different lengths of the pipes will affect the note. So a short pipe like this one will make a high-pitched noise like this. And the longer pipes will make a deeper sound like this. The cathedral is filled not only by the sound of the organ, but also the sound of beautiful voices. Each day, boys and girls from the Cathedral Choir School sing during our services. The school was set up in 1432 and is the oldest school in Ireland. The boys and girls in this school get their usual lessons, but before and after school, they sing in the church. They also get a chance to travel to other countries and even get to record their own CD. Pretty cool, right? The choir space is one of the most important areas within the cathedral, because this is where most of our religious services are held. The clergy will preach from the lectern and the choir sing in the stalls. The choir space also has a number of interesting objects. The first are these flags which hang above the stalls. These are the family flags from members of the Order of the Knights of St. Patrick. In 1783, King George III set up the order, and the colour of the knights' robes was a light blue colour, which was known as St. Patrick's blue. Their meetings were held in the cathedral until 1869, when they moved to St. Patrick's Hall in Dublin Castle. Above the altar, we have something very strange. Have a look at this object hanging from a chain. What do you think it is? Surprisingly, it's actually a cannonball. This cannonball killed a man named Adam Loftus during the Siege of Limerick in 1691. He was part of the Williamite army, and when he died, the family brought him back to Dublin to be buried within the cathedral. But strangely enough, they also brought back the cannonball, and no one is really sure why. Can you think of any reasons? The Lady Chapel is located behind the high altar at the east end of the cathedral. It was added by Archbishop Fulk de Sanford as an extension 50 years after the cathedral was made. Lady chapels are a very common feature of early medieval cathedrals. And it's called a Lady Chapel not because it's a ladies only space, but because it was named after Our Lady, the Virgin Mary. Many visitors, when they come to the cathedral, are taken aback by how beautiful the space is, with its gorgeous stained glass windows, bright blue walls, and an impressive Gothic ribbed vault roof. But this chapel wasn't always looking so good. Between 2012 and 2013, the chapel was closed to visitors and underwent a massive restoration project. Every part of the chapel had to be cleaned, and the difference was unbelievable. Well, not surprising. Imagine if you didn't clean your room for over 700 years. It would look pretty gross too. The cathedral also brought in a stained glass conservator, Miss Bianca DeVito, who restored the delicate stained glass, and you can really see the difference. The Lady Chapel is used today for small services like the Eucharist on Wednesdays, some weddings, and some baptisms. But most of all, it is a peaceful space for quiet prayer and reflection. This is one of my favourite objects in the cathedral. It is a pulpit that belonged to a man called Jonathan Swift. He was dean of the cathedral, but he was also a famous author and was best known for his book Gulliver's Travels. Jonathan would preach his sermons from this pulpit, but when he was dean, it looked a little bit different. He had wheels added to the bottom. Why do you think he put wheels on the bottom of his pulpit? Well, there was nothing that annoyed him more than people falling asleep in church. So if he noticed anyone falling asleep, he'd be wheeled over to the person and then shout down to wake them up. Jonathan was an unusual man in a lot of ways. He loved keeping fit, and it's said that he used to run up and down the stairs of the tower every day. He was also known to take regular baths, which was very unusual in the 1700s. In the cathedral, we have a cabinet which holds 2 of his death masks. This was common in the 1700s. People would take plaster casts of someone's face to preserve what they looked like, because of course back then they didn't have cameras. Jonathan is buried in the cathedral next to his best friend Esther Johnson. They were super close friends, and Jonathan was so upset when Esther died that he couldn't even go to her funeral. He also made sure that he would be buried next to her when he eventually died. Jonathan also wrote his own epitaph in Latin before he passed, and it says, "Here lies the body of Jonathan Swift, Doctor of Divinity and Dean of this cathedral, where savage indignation can no longer lacerate his heart. Go, traveller, and imitate if you can this dedicated and earnest champion of liberty." I hope you enjoy taking this virtual tour through St. Patrick's Cathedral with me. And from everyone here at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, I hope you have a great day.